In the last episode of Prehistoric Planet on Apple TV+, it delves into the dinosaur-inhabited woodlands. Forests begins in South America with a titanosaur known as Australoposeidon magnificus of Brazil. It's quite interesting to see how these very titanic dinosaurs are dwarfed by the forest in which they live. When seen from above, they look like elephants, and it's really hard to tell the scale of the creatures. I'm glad we get to see a close-up of the sauropods in this documentary because maybe it's the way I'm remembering it, but I don't often see the faces of sauropods. Their bodies are so large and their necks so long that they tend to take up most of the focus whenever they're portrayed on the screen. One of the first portrayals I've seen of this is in the Jurassic Park movie where Tim Lex and Alan Grant are in the tree and they come face to face with the Brachiosaurus. We don't get much into their family structure, but it seems as though the Australoposeidon have a close-knit family unit, as do elephants. There's one later, being the matriarch or patriarch, and the oldest creature who takes a lead and shows the others what to do and where to go. After the sauropods make a clearing in the forest, it's so amazing what they show next, and just the short segment they showed demonstrated how lovely this other living kingdom truly is when we live inside their time frame. So they showcase how the plants fight for the light. They showcase plants as living things, which they are, and when time is sped up, you can actually see what plants really are, filled with life and motion. When I was in dendrology class, I used to draw plants as like dragon-like creatures. This was so I could remember my tests and stuff, and it made it more interesting and easy to identify them because their leaves were like scales or parts of their wings. It was really cool. I don't know where I put that book. Anyway, I imagined that in their world, they saw and experienced themselves entirely different than we did. We don't actually apply our rationale to them or our way of looking at things since they appear motionless and immobile to us. They're the only thing in their universe, like their kind is the only thing that kind of exists in their universe as a living motion thing. I actually wrote some stories about this. I don't know what I did with the books. I was so disappointed because I had so many main characters and stories and they just got lost and left behind. Maybe they're in boxes, I don't know. I'm going to have to just redo the whole thing. But as I see it in my universe, which I created for them, plants are frequently moving in slow motion. It's a very strange thing because when they're young, they seem to age very quickly, but they still perceive time way slower than us. And compared to the way that they perceive time and the fact that some of them only live up to like 100-something years, it would seem as though they in fact have a shorter lifespan than we do because they perceive time slower, but then they only live to 100 years, when in fact there are some trees that live to be thousands of years old. But still, the way that they perceive time, like, or in my world, how they would perceive time as being very, very slow, like, for them it's normal speed. But to us, our comparison, it would be really slow. They're in fact much younger than us. They age a lot faster, but we just can't see it because they're growing very slowly, so slowly and moving so slowly that we can't even perceive them moving. As an example, for some species of trees, 20 days for them would be just a few minutes for us. In the world I created for them, they would not even recognize us. If they could see, we would appear as hazy streaks of light. And the only time they would know what we were or see us in full is if we died or sat for an extended period of time. And then it would look as though we're there and then we're not, because remember, things rot. So as they're sitting there, imagine this hazy streak of light is just like flying around, and then all of a sudden it stops, and for a split second the trees are like, oh shit, that's what that thing looks like, look, it stopped. And then in only a moment it's there, and then you just see its muscles and stuff fall away, and the bone just like is sitting there and then gets buried by the dirt and it's gone. We would essentially be the Flash. We're speedsters in their world. And how horrifying it would be if they had the same level of reasoning and perception as we did, saw that one of their people were standing there one day with their friends, just talking, shooting the shit, only for something fast and blurry, or something that they don't even see, to fly around the base of one of them and separate their midsection from the rest of their body. Their friends would watch them fall and not know what caused it. In their world, for all we know, that tree probably, the tree that's fallen probably tripped and fell, or it was a cause of something else. However, most of the time, they would not ascribe these occurrences to us because they can't see us. And insects are even worse. They can't see them. It's not even on their radar. This is why they built up defenses and why there's safety in numbers. I just thought it interesting, and that story came back to me when I was watching this because you speed up time, plants resemble animals and become far more frightening. I suppose the Venus flytrap in their world would be comparable to a type of wereplant. But, as shown in the time-lapse segment, the competitiveness and aggressiveness of plants makes it easier for us to recognize them as living entities and not just a backdrop. Following this enticing snippet, we meet a Triceratops herd. It's lovely to show them in this light as being more than just creatures fighting off a carnivore or becoming one's lunch. I didn't know this before, but there are actually 2 Triceratops species known to science. There's Triceratops prorsus. Why is an R beside an S and it's in the middle of a word? It's freaking weird. Anyway, Triceratops prorsus, which has a protruding nasal horn, and Triceratops horridus, which has a much smaller nasal horn and seemingly longer angled horns. An easy way to remember this would be Triceratops prorsus is a Triceratops that is a pro at fighting because its weapons are all long and super sharp. Its nasal horn is protruding more. Prorsus, protruding. Triceratops horridus is seen as horrid because its nose horn is so short. It would be a horrible disgrace to other types of Triceratops. They would probably utter something if they saw this thing and say something like, "You look horrid to us. So horrid us," right? I just thought that was an easy way to remember it, but what is the general theory is that these horrid Triceratops who lacked a very sharp and long nasal horn eventually evolved into Triceratops prorsus via anagenesis, the process of species being formed by transforming to one type of animal from another type of animal instead of just branching off into clades. Showcasing the Triceratops, which is the Triceratops horridus, the ones with the smaller horns, traveling together through the caves make them feel more like a family unit, and like animals like this could exist today, as though this is all happening in some remote location somewhere on our planet right now. The designs for the baby Triceratops and for the baby dinosaurs in general in this documentary are magnificent, and they really do look as though they're the baby versions of animals instead of just copy and paste mini versions like they did in past documentaries. I would love to tell a story about these Triceratops as well. Not just them going into the cave, but like what occurred before, how their life was, what their society is like. I would probably tell it from the perspective of the mother, this being her first time having a calf. She's picked on by all the others and her boy is weak compared to their offspring. I'd probably tell it like third person too, because a lot of people like the first person POVs. I enjoy telling it third person, means I'm a narrator talking about what they're feeling, because in that way I can also talk about the environment and other places where the character's not. From the POVs, you always have to be telling things from their perspective directly, and it's like, okay, if they die, there's nothing else to be said about it. It's really weird. It's just very limited way of storytelling, in my opinion. That's why I usually tell it from a third point of view stories. Anyway, this mother that's picked on, her offspring doesn't learn as quickly as the others, and he's not as strong as the others. Even their female offspring are stronger than him. So the mother Triceratops has always been picked on by the other females and males of her herd, and her life is just miserable. Maybe she's from another herd or something, and she's an outsider. Anyway, the Triceratops herd are told over and over again explicitly that if anyone gets lost in the caves, they usually stay lost. In my story about them, the caves would be much larger and have many turns, and just to add some dramatization, I would probably put some sort of mysterious creature that they tell about in their stories in the caves that feeds on babies or small animals that venture in and get lost. And at times, there's even bigger ones that prey on the adults that get lost. The fact that the baby made it out alive would definitely redeem his standing in the herd. I imagine they'd all be making fun of the female at first, saying how irresponsible she is and how it was only a matter of time before she lost the thing, meaning her baby. Only for there to be a later pleasant surprise and quite shocking one to the other herd members when her son braves the cave and comes out and finds them. It's not like staying in one place or whatever would be an option, because there are those things inside the cave, or maybe the poison that he'd eaten from that plant would end up killing him before he has a chance to find his way out. None of the other Triceratops can go back and look for him because everyone is too busy trying to neutralize a toxin inside of them and inside of their babies. I imagine because the Triceratops are such badasses that eating toxic plants is probably a rite of passage and also proves that they are warriors. Anyone who gets lost in the cave, especially since time is a factor, would eventually die because they would start hallucinating to the extreme, become turnaround lost, and it's possibly something that would eventually shut down all their organs and systems. As a matter of fact, what would make it more interesting is if all the Triceratops were already like on the cusp of hallucinating. At least that's the state that they were starting to be in or already in when they went through the cave together. They all seem to have been rushing a bit, and you just have to trust that the leader knows where he's going and that you can keep up in the dark while the leader also is hallucinating. I imagine that this little ritual of theirs that causes them to start to hallucinate would make the cave very scary. They would start to see crap, so we wouldn't ever find out whether or not there was actually a scary creature in the cave, or if that was just a product of the Triceratops hallucinating and meeting their death by falling over some crevasse or getting stuck between rocks or just getting lost. Maybe it could be something where the baby has a specific gene, and what makes him look weaker to the others actually makes him stronger, and his descendants would end up being the Prorsus Triceratops that we see in media with the longer nasal horn, because he survives more because less of his people die, because he has something in his body that allows him to metabolize the toxin much slower so it doesn't become lethal as fast as it does with everybody else. Anyway, it was really fun for me to imagine that, and that's just the synopsis or rough draft of my story. By the way, I love the shot of them coming out of the cave into the clearing with the clay stuff because it looks like an album cover. It looks also very freaking creepy. I love it. They almost look like little toy models, but the lighting is so well done in this as well. It's just something I have to give credit to. They really did a good job at making the environments and the creatures look realistic, not just because of the graphics of the creatures, but the lighting is a huge part of making them look realistic. A lot of the CGI flubs that we see in documentaries, or even like modern day cinema with movies, is because things are not lit properly based on the environment that they're in. After that heartwarming ending of the baby Triceratops making it through the cave to meet his mom, reunite with her, and get his clay cure, we are treated to the stupidest and most amusing segment of this whole docu-series, a speculative mating display by the Carnotaurus. This entire documentary is speculative biology. None of us were alive during the dinosaur era, and we might be utterly mistaken about how they looked and behaved even now. When it comes to behavior, all we have today are creatures like elephants, giraffes to model themselves after. For all we know, the feathers that we see on the raptors may look like indentations of feathers, but they're actually freaking leaves. You never know. You never know. You never know if it's like, oh, it came out of them, or it did come out of them, but it's actually something else that's akin to a feather, but not exactly that. It just looks like it because of what we can see. I know I'm being ridiculous, but I'm just saying that things can look a whole lot different than what we think they are. The dinosaurs that we see portrayed in media can look a lot more fluffy or even more intimidating than they're portrayed in media now. So apparently what we see with the display of the Carnotaurus arms is an adaptation of artist John Conway's depiction in All Yesterday's unique and speculative views of dinosaurs and other prehistoric animals that Conway and Naish put together with the artist C.M. Kozman. C.M. Kozman, that's my guy. On John Conway's Twitter, there's a picture of a Carnotaurus, and I guess that's how it would evolve, and eventually it would lose its arms and have what seems to be these vestigial flaps at its sides that it would probably use as a mating display or an intimidation display. It makes sense that its horns would go out to the side and become longer as a means to protect itself and battle other males for territory and females. All this being said, the Carnotaurus presented in Prehistoric Planet, honestly, to me, it feels more frog-like and is, again, in my opinion, the least scary portrayal of a Carnotaurus I have ever seen. I feel like I would walk past this animal and give it a wide berth, you know, just because, but not exactly be terrified of it. Maybe it's because the design for the Carnotaurus here is a lot less jagged and angular than the other depictions we've seen. Anyway, I did think it was very interesting, albeit silly, for the Carnotaurus to use his arms in a mating dance. I like the suspense, wondering if the female's going to accept him. And then she just straight up rejects him. Your pets stink, and you look stupid. The following scene transports us to East Asia in the fall, where we are introduced to a flock of Corythoraptor jacobsi feeding on the fallen nuts of the ginkgo tree. The Corythoraptor looks like a type of oviraptor, and it's just seemingly much larger. I think the design choice was very fitting for the creature. Apparently, for what I found, this is a relatively new discovery, or discovered type of oviraptor, having been discovered in 2017 by Chinese paleontologist Junchang Liu. These creatures don't look like they possess the best intelligence, but they have evolved to run very fast and have good eyesight, so they can detect danger from afar and react quickly to getting away from it. However, the elegant creature that we see hunting them has evolved, painted stripes along her body and head to blend in with the tree coverage, and I don't know if her skin and feathers change color based on the seasons, but she definitely fits well within the autumn brush. This type of tyrannosaur is called the Qianzhousaurus sinensis, which was also discovered by the same guy, Liu, and others in 2004. The first thing I noticed about this girl was how elegant she looked with her slender, thin snout and very lengthy and lean appearance. Looking at her straight on, I would not say that she's a tyrannosaur. To me, she looks more like a Herrerasaurus, but her jaws are even more narrow. Watching her hunt is quite the delight. The Qianzhou looks very experienced and confident, the way an African leopard does as she's prowling her savanna. That's why I nicknamed this dinosaur Savannah. I would love to tell her story as well. I wish these segments were longer and that they would come back and tell us the individual stories of the creatures in them, because there's just so much to tell. I can honestly say that the Qianzhousaurus is one of my favorite dinosaurs of the series. So back in North America, we see an Edmontosaurus mother shepherding her two offspring away from a forest fire. She seems to be experienced, and this is probably not her first forest fire, or maybe it is. I imagine it would make for a more interesting story if she was the only survivor out of her herd and she and her babies have to fight against all odds to find their way out of the forest fire. Maybe after that she would find a new herd, and possibly within that larger herd she would see her mother or sister or brother having joined that herd as well. It would be a happy ending because, after all, she made it out of the forest fire. That was in the segment of Prehistoric Planet. Following this event, we see a creature I did not expect to, an Atrociraptor, another dromaeosaur I've not heard about until Jurassic Park or Jurassic World Jurassic World Dominion, sorry. The dromaeosaurs are my favorite types of dinosaurs in this series. Apparently there's not much known about the Atrociraptors because at the time of this video, they only have a piece of its top jaw and even less of the bottom jaw. People are calling it a new type of dromaeosaur, but we really don't know. I really do like the design, however, in Prehistoric Planet because it looks so different than all the others. What is clear is that they took inspiration from modern day birds, clearly. The first thing that came to mind was the brown snake eagle, golden eagle, and red-tailed hawk. All three birds belonging to the raptor group or birds of prey. And from what I could find, over the years, many scientists have said that birds evolved from creatures like T-Rex and Velociraptor. Some people are saying that birds were their own thing and they did not evolve from T-Rex or the dinosaurs, and I'm like, are y'all creationists? Because, I mean, everybody else that I know of from a scientific viewpoint is saying that they were. Does that mean they're absolutely right? It's possible they're not, but I don't know. But anyway, over time they became smaller in stature, which would be an important component in evolving them to fly and become what we now know as birds. By the way, for this specific thing I had to up the saturation. As you'll notice, this was the original and now this is the saturated version because I don't know what was going on, but I could not see the colors. I'm like, all the dinosaurs are starting to blend in, but look how much better it looks once you up the saturation. So if, I don't know, maybe it depends on the monitor that you have. Maybe it's my OBS settings, I don't know. But everything looks normal except for this documenter. It looks way more desaturated. This looks way better. You can see the colors pop a little bit more. Beautiful. Now I can appreciate the colors. I wish I did that from the start. Jesus. Also, a quick note, I find it really cute that you can see the tufts of feathers around the Atrociraptor here. There's like a difference with the raptors, they're designed. I always imagine them having these long feathers in the back to make them look like dragons. That's what I would have done, but they still look good like this, their little Ulysses beard. Anyway, back to the whole conversation of birds evolving, being evolved from dromaeosaurs or raptors. I guess that's why we see a lot of dromaeosaurs with wings, and what's impressive is that the Atrociraptor has large wings and is seen or portrayed as being lightweight and launching itself into the air with a little bit of hang time, which makes me believe that if it had fallen from a great height, its wings would help to slow its fall. The wings also help to give it a sort of double jump and make it faster when catching prey, as we've seen being portrayed by previous dromaeosaurs. It's also interesting to see Prehistoric Planet display the intelligence of raptors and not only how they hunt their prey, but how they get rid of parasites or solve problems. This is the second time we are seeing a raptor utilize fire for their benefit. Apparently there are some modern day birds that line their nests with cigarette butts because the nicotine in them works as a repellent for certain parasites. The fact that birds are so adaptable is very impressive and makes it believable that raptors of old would do the same thing or similar things in order to solve their problems. As we conclude that scene, we are quickly shown a Nintendo Bowser colored ankylosaur, which I found hilarious. I nicknamed him Koopa because, oh boy, I wonder if that was just a coincidence because it still reminds me of the SNES and NES versions of Bowser. Maybe we should name it Bowser. And what's his story? What the hell is he doing there? The reason why I feel like it's not just a coincidence is because this creature is colored like Bowser and looks like him, and he travels from God knows where so he can eat the ashes and eat the coal. Bowser breathes fire. Coincidence? I don't know. The segment highlighting bioluminescent fungi felt very reminiscent of Pandora from Avatar. I like that they showcase some of these things, and you may think it annoying at first because you just want to see the dinosaurs, but a huge part of what makes this documentary so appealing is also the environment or the building of the worlds. Like, every picture, every environment we've seen so far is a wallpaper. It's so beautiful. When I used to tell my brothers stories about alien planets to help them go to sleep, one of my favorite things to do was build a world in which these alien creatures lived. That way, if you did not see an animal creature right away, you were still in total awe of the environment into which you were placed. Trees that seemed substrate, but after a while would uproot, spread their branches, and with the sound of the creaking groan of their woody bodies, they would flap their branches and take off into the air, are sights that you would see before you ever see an actual animalistic looking creature. So as these trees would take off, hundreds of them, they would pulse lights from their leaves as they're flying or floating across the chasm of updraft, leaving a trail of leaves, glowing leaves for the rest of their group to follow. They also utilize lights to communicate with one another, so it's like, can they see or can they feel the energy? We didn't see eyes on them. It was just amazing. And seeing and hearing the sauropod slumber added to the feeling of being immersed in this world. The portion featuring the 3 baby Therizinosaurus hatchlings hiking into the jungle in quest of honey was so endearing. They're by far the cutest baby dinosaurs in the series. I was sorry when they were getting stung by bees, but strangely, despite my intolerance to constantly hearing buzzing insects around me, it doesn't bother me when it comes to bees. I don't know if it's the frequency of their wings or the fact that they're not considered pests, and I actually like them. I like bees. I thought I was going to have to cover my ears and sing, but I didn't. I was surprised. I'm like, oh, they're buzzing, and it's not bothering my ears. Must be a psychological thing. What completed the scene was when the babies looked up and saw an adult Therizinosaurus. The adult is 30 feet long, not 30 feet tall, but still about 16 feet tall. The creature was massive. Nobody really thinks about the baby versions of these creatures. I mean, we thought about baby T-Rexes and Triceratops because we've seen them in media. We thought about baby Apatosauruses and other sauropods because we've seen them in media. We don't usually see our baby raptors or baby Therizinosaurus, so it was very interesting to see these babies together. This is my first time seeing a baby version of the species on screen, and that's just freaking awesome. Milestone. Anyway, the scene was enhanced when the baby saw the adult version, not just for what it symbolized, but also to understand the distinction between the two. I don't know if they took inspiration from this, but it seems as though they took the scene right from out of Bambi when he saw his father for the first time, when the adult gracefully comes out from the right-hand side of the forest into the clearing as the baby looks on in awe and reverence. That was straight out of the scene with Bambi. And then the look on Bambi's face when his father looks at him. It's as if the stag commands respect, and he's not there to smile with Bambi, but to evaluate him and notice him and recognize him as his son.
You can't kill me.
That was so cool. They had to cheapen it up with the part 2. Part 2 was still endearing too, but it was way too on the nose. Anyways, now they didn't show all of that with the Therizinosaurus babies, but it was implied that this little creature obviously looked up to this big creature and noticed it was something wondrous. Whether the baby knew this was a member of its species or even a member of its family, it's totally possible that this Therizinosaurus could have been its father. It was still a very powerful scene. Through the baby's eyes, it's looking at this huge thing that is able to not only tower over them, the way that it does, how big it is, and move so gracefully through the forest with how big it is. It's also tall enough to be able to get the honey that they want down from the tree, no problem, no effort whatsoever. They were trying to climb up on this tree and they were falling over and just failing at it and getting eaten up by the bees. But this guy can not only reach it, no problem, hit it down, cause a swarm of bees to be around it, and take a bite out of the honey without being bothered by the bees. Like, he's not getting stung in the face and in the mouth and on the tongue. All he does is walks away and he's like, that was spicy, I like that. And they're like, what the fuck? Like, to the baby Zeno, it's as if he's looking at his future. By the way, that's what I named the babies. The leader is Zeno and his siblings are Torii and Osa. From the little I've seen of Therizinosaurus, people tend to like to display them as like Edward Scissorhands gone mad, an animal that eats vegetation and looks like an herbivore mixed with a carnivore. However, this animal to me seems as though it would be more on the gentle side and resembles a sloth, another gentle, slow-moving creature that has very large claws. However, the reason that the sloth's claws are so large and long is so it can hang upside down without using much energy. The reason why it hangs upside down is because it's slow moving and things like hawks and eagles try to eat it. So being upside down kind of camouflages it and it looks like a leaf or hanging foliage. I don't know. Also, I know this has nothing to do with the documentary, but while I was looking up stuff on the sloth, I saw a questions. Do spiders fart? And, you know, apparently they do. So, yeah. Anyways, Prehistoric Planet concludes the 5-episode adventure with a visit to the most southern area of Europe. We see a type of hadrosaur called Telmatosaurus, which only comes in at about 5 meters long, or 16 feet long, which is considered, I guess, on the smaller side. It's possible that most of the dinosaurs here are very small because of their environment. This is known as insular dwarfism, a phenomenon in which huge animals develop to or typically have a reduction in body size when their population number is constrained due to living on a tiny island or in a small area. Examples of this seem to be the Zalmoxes, which is a type of iguanodontian. And yes, that means that it's relative to an iguanodon. These guys are described as being young, though, in Prehistoric Planet, so I thought they were babies or something like that. They definitely don't look like babies to me, though. They look like large dinosaurs in a small package. Across most animal species, babies usually have larger heads in their bodies, especially when compared to the adults. However, this doesn't seem like the case with these guys. It just looks off. And for some reason, when I look at these things, they remind me of hobbits. I can just imagine their entire journey being similar to that of Lord of the Rings, minus the ring. My story for them would be a self-contained one, where there's some RPG-type quests that they'd have to do in order to save their world, or some foolishness like that. Of course, I'd want to come up with something different than what's just rinse and repeating in media, and something more meaningful. During their adventure, many of the friends end up dying. Surely, now they all look the same in the segment, but in my story, they would each have specific interests and skills. My story would play out similar to the game RimWorld, where specific characters would be chosen for specific skills. That means that everybody is important, and when one person is lost, that jeopardizes the entire adventure. They're not just numbers to kill off to make things interesting like they do in a lot of horror movies. They each have an important purpose. In my world that I would build for them, they would not have a very large population, and so they would not have the luxury of just throwing bodies at whatever danger they face. Because they are so limited in population, each of them play a very important role in their society. Everything wants to hunt them on top of that, and they depend on each other to survive. When I looked at the segment of the running across the street, they appeared terrified, suspicious, and hurried. So clearly time is of the essence, and the Hasagopteryx that yoinked one of them would not be the only danger they would face. As numerous other species make their way to the shore, the exquisite Hasagopteryx becomes the focal point. It's claimed to be the only spot on the beach where he can spread his wings, and I assume he's visited numerous other islands before this one. It must be lovely to know that if the resources on this one run out, you could just head on over to another one with a beat of his wings. My story for him would be one of hardship, because I'm evil like that. So as he's launching himself into the air utilizing the same quadrupedal vaulting method the male Muto from Godzilla 2014 used, and flying to another island, he would successfully land on another island, only to get his wing injured somehow. How? I don't know yet. Maybe there's like an updraft and he like flies in between a tree or something happens. I don't know. He'd be stuck there, forced to live out his life on the ground, where he would soon learn he's not the only predator on this island, and there's no way for him to quickly get away or make an escape. Plus, he has to find food to support, his body and everything, because he's like a really large flyer. That would be some Sam Raimi style terror. I love it. Anyway, it seems as though Prehistoric Planet takes place at the end of the Cretaceous period, and usually with these type of documentaries, they have a habit of showcasing the extinction event, but I'm so glad they chose not to do this. This gives us the impression that these dinosaurs are still alive somewhere. It also opens the door to future adventures with other sorts of dinosaurs. Honestly, this feels like a demo reel or a trailer of more stories to come focusing on these dinosaurs. I love world building when I'm writing POV tales. People want to know more about the few that I posted at the time of the video. They want to know how the story ends for the Dreadnoughtus main characters. They want to know how the baby T-Rexes grew or what happened to their mother, why she went missing. Of course, my stories are unofficial and transformative tales inspired by what I've seen on Prehistoric Planet, but they don't tell the actual story. Even the Prehistoric Planet series itself doesn't tell the actual story of what happened, but imagine if it could be so endearing for it to be made canon. The backstories of each of the dinosaurs and prehistoric creatures we've seen so far in season 1 of Prehistoric Planet being told here on out. They come up with a new season. The T-Rex is on the beach and we get to watch the babies grow up. Something like Pod the Pyroraptor or the Tarbosaurus story. Like all of those where they're following a specific creature and not knowing whether or not he's going to die. Knowing like, oh, this creature is so awesome. I want him to live out his life. Even though I know he's extinct, I still want him to live, to be happy. And then you find out that he died early, and you never know if your main character is going to be the one that bites the dust before he ever gets to have a family or live. And then you're like, this is where he died, and this was the end of his life. And then it zooms out and you see the fossil where he died in like the stupidest tar pit. Of all the things that didn't kill him, that's what did it. And then you're like, no. But that would be fun. And I am the kind of person, you're gonna get very mad at me, I am the kind of person who would kill off main characters. The only ones I retcon are ones that are like used for entertainment purposes, I can't speak today. For entertainment purposes, like the Land Before Time parodies. But in these original stories, like the ones that have nothing to do with that, like just made up stuff, not based on any other character, you never know. You never know. But anyway, by omitting the extinction event, a documentary may remain timeless, enabling us to concentrate on the beauty of these animals' existence rather than being gratuitously reminded of how cruelly they perished. It's so different from savoring the experience of life on Pandora from the Avatar series without someone reminding you that it's all fake and these creatures never existed. It's akin to whipping a dying horse or dumping ice cold water on someone suffering from hypothermia. It's really cruel and unnecessary. So in my heart, this Prehistoric Planet documentary will always be the true Jurassic Park presentation that should have been. Thanks so much for watching. This has been Ultiori. You ask, we answer.